Tourism is one of the clearest ways to understand Ontario. Not just where people visit, but why certain places attract attention while others remain less visible. This film looks at Ontario through travel, while placing tourism inside the province's broader historical, geographic, and economic context. Located in east-central Canada, Ontario is the country's most populous province and a major driver of its economy. The provincial capital, Toronto, is also Canada's largest metropolitan area and a central hub for finance, culture, and transportation. From this urban core, roads, railways, and air routes extend outward, shaping how the province is explored. Long before tourism existed as an industry, this land was shaped by Indigenous nations who moved and traded along lakes, rivers, and portage routes. Many of today's travel corridors follow those same paths. European settlement later expanded along waterways and fertile land, laying the groundwork for towns, cities, and early travel networks. As Ontario developed, tourism followed geography. The Great Lakes enabled shoreline communities, ports, and resort towns. Fertile southern regions supported dense settlement and cultural institutions. In contrast, the Canadian Shield limited agriculture but preserved forests, lakes, and rugged landscapes that later became central to outdoor travel and seasonal tourism. These patterns created a province with multiple travel identities. Urban tourism concentrates around culture, events, and architecture. Rural regions emphasize space, nature, and slower movement. Some areas attract visitors year-round, while others depend heavily on seasonal cycles. Together, they form a tourism landscape shaped as much by history and land as by modern demand. This documentary looks at Ontario through tourism, focusing on the places people travel to and what draws visitors to them. Rather than separating destinations from their context, it connects them to the history, economy, and environment that shape how tourism develops. From here, the focus moves into Ontario's regions and the distinct tourism roles each one plays within the province as a whole. Southwestern Ontario occupies a strategic position along Canada's southern edge, bordered by Lake Erie, Lake St. Clair, and the Detroit River. This location has long made the region one of Ontario's most accessible and interconnected areas, both within Canada and across the border with the United States. Southwestern Ontario's tourism narrative becomes more focused when attention shifts to Windsor, a city defined by its position on the Detroit River. As Canada's southernmost city, Windsor has long functioned as a point of connection, economically, culturally, and geographically, between Ontario and the United States. Tourism in Windsor is closely tied to its waterfront. The riverfront stretches along the international boundary, offering uninterrupted views across to the Detroit skyline. Public parks, walking paths, and open gathering spaces have gradually transformed this area from an industrial edge into a recreational corridor. What stands out here is accessibility. The waterfront is integrated into daily urban life rather than separated from it. This setting shapes Windsor's visitor experience. Events, festivals, and seasonal activities often center on the river. Sightlines across the water reinforce the city's cross-border identity, while proximity to downtown keeps tourism connected to restaurants, cultural venues, and accommodation. Rather than relying on landmarks alone, Windsor's appeal comes from movement, views, and its role as a gateway city. Inland, London plays a different role, As a regional hub for education and healthcare, the city's tourism presence is quieter and more dispersed. Green corridors along the Thames River, urban parks, and cultural institutions form the core of its visitor appeal, supporting short stays rather than destination-driven travel. Closer to Lake Huron, Sarnia combines an industrial identity with waterfront access. While energy infrastructure defines much of the local economy, beaches and lakeside parks introduce a seasonal tourism layer that contrasts with the city's working landscape. Further south, agricultural regions also shape southwestern Ontario's tourism profile. Chatham-Kent reflects rural travel tied to small communities and farmland, while Leamington is closely associated with greenhouse agriculture and lake-oriented recreation, linking food production with seasonal visitation. Together, these places show how tourism in southwestern Ontario grows out of geography and everyday function rather than spectacle, rooted in movement, proximity, and working landscapes. The Niagara region sits between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, forming one of Ontario's most clearly defined tourism corridors. Its position along the Niagara River has shaped settlement, trade, and movement for centuries, making the region both a natural boundary and a point of connection. At the center of the region stands Niagara Falls, the area's most recognized and most visited destination. The falls draw visitors year-round, not only for their scale, but for how closely tourism infrastructure surrounds them. Observation areas, pedestrian routes, and viewing platforms are designed to keep the water constantly in view. One of the defining experiences here is the boat tours that approach the base of the falls. These routes bring visitors close to the water's movement and sound, turning the natural landmark into an immersive encounter rather than a distant sight. Around the falls, hotels, towers, and attractions concentrate tourism activity within a compact area. Just beyond the river's edge, Clifton Hill adds a different layer to the experience. Arcades, themed attractions, and nightlife create a dense entertainment zone that contrasts sharply with the natural setting nearby. This combination of spectacle and landscape defines Niagara Falls as a destination built as much around tourism infrastructure as the falls themselves. A short distance away, Niagara-on-the-Lake presents a quieter profile. Known for its historic streets, wineries, and cultural institutions, the town offers a slower pace that emphasizes heritage, local production, and seasonal tourism rather than volume. Further inland, St. Catharines functions as the region's largest urban center. Its role is more residential and commercial, but waterfront access, canal routes, and nearby vineyards tie the city into Niagara's broader tourism landscape. Together, these places show how the Niagara region operates as Ontario's most tourism-focused area, combining natural spectacle, entertainment infrastructure, and historic towns within a tightly connected geographic space. The Hamilton, Halton, and Brant area sits at a key transition point between the western end of Lake Ontario and the interior of southern Ontario. Positioned between major urban centers and extensive natural corridors, the region has long functioned as both a gateway and a buffer, linking dense metropolitan life with escarpments, river valleys, and conservation land. At the center of the region is Hamilton, a city shaped by industry and geography. Once known primarily for steel production and heavy manufacturing, Hamilton has undergone visible transformation. Former industrial zones now sit alongside redeveloped waterfront areas, cultural institutions, and expanding residential districts. Tourism in Hamilton is closely tied to the Niagara Escarpment, which cuts through the city and creates a landscape unlike any other in southern Ontario. Dozens of waterfalls, wooded trails, and conservation areas surround the urban core, earning the area a reputation for outdoor access within a city environment. Hiking, cycling, and scenic viewpoints form a major part of Hamilton's visitor appeal, balancing its industrial past with a strong natural presence. Along the lake to the east, Burlington presents a more residential and waterfront-oriented identity. Parks, marinas, and lakeside paths shape local tourism, offering open space and views that contrast with nearby urban density. The city functions as a quieter stop along Lake Ontario rather than a standalone destination. Nearby, Oakville combines suburban development with a historic harbor area. Tourism here centers on walkable waterfront districts, heritage buildings, and lake access, supporting short visits rather than large-scale attractions. Further inland, Milton is closely associated with conservation lands and escarpment access. Trails, limestone cliffs, and protected natural areas define its tourism role, drawing visitors interested in hiking and outdoor recreation. To the west, Brantford sits along the Grand River, where river landscapes and surrounding green space shape local travel experiences. The city's connection to waterways and regional trail systems places nature at the center of its tourism profile. Together, Hamilton, Halton, and Brant form a region where tourism grows from contrast. Industrial history alongside escarpment landscapes, urban centers bordering conservation land, and natural features integrated into everyday movement and travel. The Huron, Perth, Waterloo, and Wellington region lies west of the Greater Toronto Area, extending toward Lake Huron and covering a mix of mid-sized cities, farmland, and river-based landscapes. Its position places it within easy reach of southern Ontario's largest population centers, while still offering a noticeably different pace and environment. Tourism here tends to be quieter and more regional. Rather than large-scale attractions, it relies on walkable town centers, natural features, and short-distance travel, particularly from Toronto and nearby urban areas. In the urban core, Kitchener-Waterloo is best known for its role in technology, education, and innovation. Tourism is limited and often tied to events, festivals, and cultural institutions rather than destination travel. Nearby, Cambridge adds historic architecture and riverfront settings, contributing a more visual, small city character. Further north, Guelph functions primarily as a university and administrative center, while Stratford stands out for its cultural tourism, particularly through performing arts and seasonal visitors. Both cities support regional tourism without defining it. The character of the region becomes clearer in smaller communities like Fergus and Elora. These towns are closely tied to the Grand River and surrounding natural features, and they play an outsized role in local tourism. Elora is especially associated with river landscapes, limestone formations, and walkable streets that combine nature with compact town life. Outdoor activities, scenic viewpoints, and seasonal changes make it a frequent destination for day trips, particularly from Toronto. Fergus, nearby, offers a similar appeal through historic streetscapes and access to trails and river corridors. Together, Fergus and Elora illustrate how tourism in this region works: short stays, repeat visits, and strong seasonal patterns. Their popularity highlights the region's role as a day trip and weekend escape, where nature and small-town settings shape travel more than major attractions. The Greater Toronto Area, commonly known as the GTA, is the most influential region not only in Ontario but in Canada as a whole. Located along the northwestern shore of Lake Ontario, it concentrates population, finance, transportation, and cultural infrastructure at a national scale. Many of the country's economic, political, and media networks operate from here, shaping how Canada presents itself both internally and abroad. The region developed through layered growth. Early port activity and rail connections established Toronto as a commercial center, while post-war expansion pushed development outward into surrounding municipalities. Today, the GTA functions as a continuous urban system rather than a single city, with tourism flowing across municipal boundaries. At the center is Toronto, Canada's largest city and its primary tourism gateway. Toronto's appeal lies in range rather than a single defining feature. Major museums, galleries, and performance venues anchor cultural tourism, while an extensive park system connects neighborhoods to the waterfront and ravine networks. Events play a central role in the city's tourism calendar, from large-scale festivals to seasonal outdoor activities. Just as significant are Toronto's ethnic neighborhoods, where migration patterns have shaped food, street life, and local culture. Areas defined by specific communities sit alongside downtown districts, creating a city where tourism often follows everyday urban life rather than isolated attractions. The waterfront adds another layer, with walking trails, islands, and public spaces that balance density with open space. Together, these elements make Toronto a destination that supports long stays, repeat visits, and varied travel styles within the same urban setting. To the west, Mississauga functions as both a major city and an extension of the Toronto's metropolitan system. Tourism here is less concentrated but still significant, shaped by waterfront parks along Lake Ontario, large shopping and event spaces, and proximity to Canada's busiest airport. Mississauga often serves as a practical base for regional travel while offering its own set of urban amenities. Further north, Brampton reflects the GTA's suburban expansion and cultural diversity. Its tourism profile is quieter, centered on parks, trail systems, and community-based events rather than major landmarks. Brampton's role within the region highlights how tourism in the GTA extends beyond downtown cores into everyday residential landscapes. Together, Toronto, Mississauga, and Brampton illustrate how tourism in the Greater Toronto Area operates at scale, through density, diversity, and constant movement across a shared metropolitan space. The York, Durham, and Headwaters area lies directly north and east of the Greater Toronto Area, forming a broad transitional zone between dense metropolitan development and more open landscapes. Stretching from Lake Ontario inland toward rolling hills and conservation land, the region reflects the outward growth of the GTA, while retaining pockets of historic towns and natural corridors. Tourism here is relatively limited and often secondary to daily life. Instead of major attractions, the region's value lies in access, both to Lake Ontario in the south and to quieter landscapes in the north. often used for short visits and local travel. Within York Region, Vaughan stands out as the area's most visible tourism center. Located at the northern edge of Toronto, the city brings together large-scale entertainment, retail districts, and event venues within a compact corridor. Tourism here is structured and destination-oriented, driven less by historic fabric and more by purpose-built attractions that draw visitors from across the region. A major part of this profile is Canada's Wonderland, one of the largest amusement parks in the country. During the summer months, the park anchors seasonal tourism with rides, themed areas, and large visitor volumes. In winter, special events such as Winterfest extend its role beyond peak season, keeping Vaughan on the tourism map year-round and reinforcing its position as a regional entertainment hub rather than a stopover destination. Nearby, Markham presents a different character. Strongly shaped by technology, business, and cultural diversity, Markham's tourism presence is quieter and more localized, centered on food culture, community events, and suburban green space rather than major landmarks. A distinct contrast appears in Unionville, one of the region's most recognizable tourist areas. Its preserved main street, historic buildings, and walkable layout create a setting that feels separate from surrounding suburban development. Unionville's appeal lies in scale and atmosphere, attracting visitors looking for a compact, heritage-focused experience rather than large attractions. Other urban centers play a more limited role in tourism. Richmond Hill, Oshawa, Pickering, Ajax, and Whitby function primarily as residential and employment centers, with tourism limited to local parks, cultural sites, and waterfront access. Along the southern edge of the region, Lake Ontario becomes the most consistent tourism asset. Waterfront trails, beaches, and marinas connect several of these communities, offering open space and seasonal recreation. In a region where tourism is understated, the lake provides continuity, linking otherwise separate cities through shared shoreline and everyday outdoor use. The Bruce, Grey, and Simcoe region is located north of the Greater Toronto Area, stretching between Georgian Bay and Lake Huron. Defined by long shorelines, forested interiors, and smaller urban centers, the area has become one of Ontario's most travel-oriented regions, particularly during the summer months. The largest urban center in the region is Barrie, located at the southern edge of Georgian Bay. Barrie functions as both a residential city and a tourism gateway, especially for visitors traveling north from Toronto. Its waterfront, parks, and proximity to recreational areas make it a base for short stays rather than a standalone destination, balancing urban services with lake-based tourism. Smaller communities also contribute to the region's tourism profile. Collingwood, Owen Sound, and Orillia serve as local hubs connected to surrounding natural areas. Their roles are tied to marinas, waterfront access, cultural venues, and seasonal events, supporting tourism without concentrating it in one place. Along the southeastern edge of Georgian Bay, Wasaga Beach stands out as one of Ontario's most recognizable summer destinations. Known for its long sandy shoreline, the area attracts large numbers of visitors during warm months. Beach access, water activities, and nearby accommodations define its tourism economy, with a strong emphasis on seasonal travel and short-term stays. Further north, Tobermory occupies a different position within the region's tourism landscape. Located at the tip of the Bruce Peninsula, Tobermory is closely associated with clear waters, rugged shoreline, and access to protected natural areas. Boat tours, hiking routes, and underwater attractions draw visitors seeking nature-focused experiences. During summer, the village becomes one of the province's most in-demand destinations, shaped by limited access and concentrated visitor flow. Together, Bruce, Grey, and Simcoe form a region where tourism is driven by water, distance, and seasonality, serving as a primary escape zone for southern Ontario during the summer months. The Kawarthas and Northumberland region lies east of the Greater Toronto Area, stretching inland from the Lake Ontario shoreline toward a dense network of lakes, rivers, and rural landscapes. Positioned between urban southern Ontario and the more remote cottage country further north, the region functions as a transition zone shaped by water access and seasonal travel. Urban centers play a relatively limited role in regional tourism. Peterborough, Northumberland County, Cobourg, and Port Hope form a corridor along Lake Ontario and nearby river routes, offering small waterfronts, historic streets, and local services. Tourism here is modest and often seasonal, tied to short visits rather than destination travel. The heart of the region's tourism identity is Kawartha Lakes. This area is defined by interconnected lakes and waterways that shape both settlement and travel. Rather than a single focal point, tourism unfolds across a network of small towns, marinas, and access points linked by water. Boating routes, canals, and shoreline communities create a continuous travel experience, where movement along the water becomes the attraction itself. Small towns throughout the Kawartha Lakes offer walkable centers, local services, and seasonal events that support repeat visits rather than one-time stops. This structure makes the region particularly suited to slow travel. Tourism here emphasizes lakeside access, short-distance exploration, and time spent between places, reflecting a landscape where water defines both geography and visitor experience. The southeastern Ontario region is located along the eastern edge of Lake Ontario, extending to the St. Lawrence River near the Canada-United States border. Its position places it between Ontario's major urban corridor and the National Capital Area, giving the region both strategic importance and a long history tied to transportation and defense. At the center of the region is Kingston, the largest city and primary tourism hub. Located where Lake Ontario meets the St. Lawrence River, Kingston's identity is closely tied to its waterfront and military past. Historic fortifications, institutional architecture, and a compact downtown shape its tourism profile. The presence of major educational institutions adds year-round activity, while waterfront access supports boat tours, walking routes, and seasonal events. Beyond Kingston, tourism is more dispersed. Prince Edward County, Belleville, Brockville, and Gananoque form a loose network of smaller centers connected by highways and waterways. These communities offer waterfront access, historic streets, and local services, supporting short stays and seasonal travel rather than large-scale tourism. One of the region's most recognizable attractions is the Thousand Islands. Stretching along the St. Lawrence River, this area is defined by hundreds of small islands, narrow channels, and scenic shorelines. Boat tours, cruising routes, and waterfront viewpoints shape the visitor experience. During the summer season, the region draws large numbers of visitors from both Canada and the United States, making it one of Ontario's most internationally oriented tourism zones. Together, these elements position southeastern Ontario as a region where tourism grows from water access, historic infrastructure, and cross-border movement, with Kingston anchoring a network of smaller destinations along the river and lake. The Ottawa region is located in eastern Ontario, along the border between Ontario and Quebec, shaped by the Ottawa River and long-standing political functions. As the seat of Canada's federal government, the region plays a unique role within the province, combining administrative importance with a well-developed tourism identity. At the center of the region is Ottawa, Canada's capital, and one of the country's most structured tourism destinations. Unlike cities driven primarily by finance or industry, Ottawa's tourism is closely tied to national institutions, public spaces, and planned urban design. Parliament Hill defines the city's international image. Its Gothic Revival buildings, open lawns, and central location make it both a political symbol and a focal point for visitors. Ceremonial events, seasonal activities, and daily public access keep the area active beyond formal government functions. Ottawa's museum network is another core element of its tourism profile. National institutions covering history, art, nature, science, and aviation are concentrated within the city, many of them designed as landmark buildings. Together, they support year-round cultural tourism and position Ottawa as one of Canada's leading museum destinations. Closer to street level, Byward Market offers a more informal layer of the city. Restaurants, food stalls, and small shops create a dense, walkable area that connects daily urban life with visitor activity. The market's central location makes it a natural transition point between major sites. Running through the heart of the city, the Rideau Canal shapes Ottawa's seasonal tourism more than any single attraction. In warmer months, it supports walking routes, cycling paths, and boat traffic. In winter, sections of the canal freeze and are used as the world's longest outdoor skating rink, turning everyday infrastructure into a defining tourism experience. Together, these elements give Ottawa a clear and organized tourism structure. National symbols, cultural institutions, public markets, and seasonal landscapes operate within a compact urban layout, making the Ottawa region one of Ontario's most clearly defined and consistently visited areas. The Ontario's Highlands, officially known as the Haliburton Highlands to the Ottawa Valley, stretches across central and eastern Ontario, north of the Greater Toronto Area, and west of Ottawa. This region marks a clear shift away from urban density, defined instead by rugged terrain, extensive forests, rivers, and lakes shaped by the Canadian Shield. The Haliburton Highlands represent the western portion of the region, characterized by elevated landscapes, dense forests, and a high concentration of lakes. Tourism here centers on cottage travel, outdoor recreation, and short-term escapes, with visitors drawn primarily by scenery and isolation rather than towns or landmarks. To the east, the Ottawa Valley follows the Ottawa River corridor. Communities here developed along water routes and retain a strong connection to river landscapes. Tourism is modest and dispersed, often focused on small towns, local trails, and seasonal river activity. Together, these areas form Ontario's Highlands, a region where tourism remains understated, shaped by distance, terrain, and long-standing patterns of land use rather than large-scale development. The Algonquin Park, Muskoka and Parry Sound region lies north of the Greater Toronto Area, extending from the southern edge of the Canadian Shield into vast forested and lake-filled landscapes. Positioned between southern Ontario's urban corridor and the province's interior, the region has become one of Ontario's most recognizable nature-based tourism areas, shaped by water, rock, and seasonal travel. Huntsville functions as a central service town for the Muskoka area. Its location near lakes, parks, and road connections makes it a practical base for regional travel. Tourism here supports accommodations, dining, and access to surrounding natural areas rather than large standalone attractions. The Muskoka is closely associated with lakeside tourism and cottage culture. Interconnected waterways, small towns, and seasonal residences shape the visitor experience. Tourism focuses on boating, waterfront access, and short-distance movement between communities, reinforcing Muskoka's identity as a long-established vacation region. Further north, Parry Sound occupies a strategic position along Georgian Bay. Its deep-water harbor and rugged shoreline connect the town to marine travel and regional parks. Tourism here emphasizes boating routes, coastal scenery, and access to surrounding natural landscapes rather than urban amenities. Smaller communities such as Gravenhurst and Bracebridge play supporting roles within the region's tourism network. Both towns are closely tied to waterways and seasonal movement, offering compact centers that serve visitors traveling between lakes and cottage areas. At the core of the region's international recognition is Algonquin Provincial Park. As one of Canada's oldest and most visited provincial parks, Algonquin defines the region's wilderness identity. Extensive forests, lakes, and wildlife habitats shape a tourism model based on hiking, canoeing, camping, and seasonal observation. Its distance from major cities reinforces its role as a destination for immersive nature experiences rather than short urban escapes. Together, Algonquin Park, Muskoka, and Parry Sound form a region where tourism is driven by landscape and seasonality, representing Ontario's most widely recognized image of lakes, forests, and extended outdoor travel. Northern Ontario covers the largest and least densely populated part of the province, stretching north of the Greater Toronto Area toward the Manitoba border and east toward Quebec. It includes northeastern Ontario, Sault Ste. Marie and Algoma, and northwest Ontario, forming a vast region defined by distance, resource-based development, and large-scale natural landscapes. Compared to southern Ontario, settlements here are fewer and farther apart, with long travel corridors shaped by lakes, forests, and the Canadian Shield. One of the region's main urban centers is Sudbury, historically associated with mining and heavy industry. Over time, Sudbury has repositioned itself as a regional service and cultural center, supporting education, science, and tourism. Its surrounding lakes, conservation areas, and outdoor spaces place nature close to the city, shaping a tourism profile that combines urban infrastructure with immediate access to the outdoors. Further east, Manitoulin Island offers a contrasting experience. Located in Lake Huron, it is the world's largest freshwater island and holds strong cultural significance for Indigenous communities. Tourism here is slower and more seasonal, centered on small towns, shoreline access, and natural landscapes rather than large attractions. Distance and limited access shape the visitor experience as much as the scenery itself. Other parts of northern Ontario contribute in different ways. Thunder Bay anchors the northwest with its port, industrial history, and dramatic lake and cliff landscapes. The Algoma country is known for forested terrain, rail routes, and access to Lake Superior, while Sault Ste. Marie connects Lake Superior and Lake Huron through shipping and cross-border movement. Together, these areas define northern Ontario as a region shaped by scale, distance, and resource history. Tourism here emphasizes space, isolation, and long travel routes, offering a fundamentally different experience from the more compact and infrastructure-heavy destinations of southern Ontario. Ontario's tourism landscape doesn't follow a single pattern. It stretches from dense metropolitan regions to small towns, from heavily visited corridors to areas where distance itself shapes the experience. What connects these places is not similarity, but structure, how geography, history, and movement determine where tourism concentrates and where it remains quiet. Across the province, travel reflects long-term decisions. Waterways become routes. Cities become gateways. Natural areas become seasonal anchors. Some regions are built to receive millions of visitors, others to absorb them slowly over time. Together, they form a tourism system that mirrors how Ontario itself functions. Seen as a whole, Ontario is not defined by one destination, but by contrast. Urban density and open space, international gateways and local escapes, highly developed regions and landscapes where infrastructure fades into the background. Understanding those contrasts is what makes travel here clearer and more intentional. If this kind of long-form region-by-region perspective adds value, leaving a comment helps guide future episodes. Subscribing to Wanderway supports more documentary-style travel content, and liking the video signals that this slower, contextual approach to tourism is worth continuing.